For most of us here today, TCU is a large part of our culture. We think of ourselves as TCU students, and we're proud of the culture we have here, to think and act as ethical leaders in a global community. It's something that shapes our everyday interactions with other people that we come across. As we all know, communication is much more complex than it appears from the outside. As a fellow TCU student, it's my goal to share with you this short, succinct guide to make horned frogs good intercultural communicators, whatever the situation. When the day comes that we shed our TCU t-shirts for suits and ties and move out into the job market, it's important to note that your culture has already been established, whether you know it or not. You may think of yourself as a horned frog, as a Texan, or maybe a United States citizen, and all would be correct. However, you have to understand that the first culture that defines you is your family culture. As communication majors and minors, we're all familiar with the basic communication model. In very basic terminology, there's a two-way channel which a sender and a receiver encode and decode a message. However, the way we communicate is vastly different across cultures, and many families can communicate in stark contrast to what you're used to. The nuclear family has been long depicted as the ideal situation for Americans. However, families are never perfect. They each perceive interactions in vastly different ways. So if you want to be a competent communicator, you need to realize that most of your interactions are really cross-cultural. Stella Toomey developed face negotiation theory in 1985. This theory is an integral part of understanding how to communicate cross-culturally. The theory is in constant flux. However, the main take-home point is that people negotiate over what she calls face. People either want to save their own face or save someone else's face. Think back to your childhood. Did your parents scold you frequently? Perhaps even use your mistakes as an opportunity to embarrass you? Or did they give you a chance to save face? In either case, this greatly influences the likelihood that you yourself will end up using these strategies in your interpersonal communication. No matter how you were raised, conflict is a natural part of all family life. You're subjected to a certain conflict style at a very young age. This conflict style is imprinted on you, and although it can change over a long period of time, it's more than likely going to stay with you for the majority of your life. Mitchell Hammer developed 4 intercultural conflict styles that are used today to classify which type of conflict management you prefer. Knowing what conflict style you gravitate towards is a big part of learning to deal with intercultural communication. The 4 types of conflict styles are dynamic style, discussion, engagement, and accommodation style. The dynamic style is a passionate response in a calm manner. Typically, this style of conflict management comes in the form of stories which evoke a strong sense of emotion from the listener. Many influential figures throughout history have used this style to motivate the masses. Then there was discussion style. People tend to speak logically about what's going on and try to find the best way to fix the problem. Engagement style is the most passionate of the bunch. Those who prefer this style need to express their emotions and can become quite heated in the midst of an argument. Finally, accommodation style users typically want to avoid any hostility or emotion at all. They're likely to concede the point even if they have something good to offer. The chances are we will run into someone who uses a different conflict style than our own. Rather than get immersed in a game of conflict style tug-of-war, we may analyze the other person, figure out their preferred conflict style, and then figure out what to do from there to make the communication process even easier. Young Kim developed another theory called the integrative theory, which will help us even further understand how to communicate in an intercultural context. She talks about a process that unfolds over time. She calls this process cultural adaptation. There are 3 primary factors that contribute to cultural adaptation. They are communication, environment, and predisposition. From a very young age, it is impossible to not pick up on the habits we see in our parents. The way parents communicate with each other, for example, has an extremely large impact on the way children will grow up to communicate themselves. In a way, this is the essence of family culture. Few families have to explicitly state their mantra or their family rules. However, because the children are exposed early and often to their ideas, they can't help but latch onto them. Many families believe that to adapt to other cultures is natural. They think that you should try to immerse yourself into the new culture as quickly as you can to start understanding how the natives live. Personal communication and social communication are key components of adaptation. However, other families have little room for understanding others' cultures. It's a part of the way they were raised, and they are simply following in the footsteps of those who raised them, just as many of us here at TCU do. As ethical and global leaders today, I urge TCU students to think about what problems could be solved by just simply addressing the family communication style differences between cultures. While this would undoubtedly not bring an end to all conflict as we know it, a lot of problems that countries have with each other simply boil down to what their parents taught them as small children. As I mentioned before, you don't get a chance to think for yourself when you're young. Your mind is automatically put on autopilot, and you simply follow in the path of those who walked it before you. Who you become as an adult is contingent upon what culture you were raised in. I hope after viewing these theories it's easier to see how intercultural communication really does occur every time you communicate with anyone outside of your family. That your family really is the first culture. It's maybe naive to think that we can solve the world's problems by simply acknowledging family communication, but as TCU students, we can at least try to carry on this knowledge into the workplace and strive to enlighten those who we come in contact with.